Have you ever really thought about how to understand a religion? I mean, really understand it. It feels like it should be simple, but it's one of the most complex questions out there. And that's because most of us, without even realizing it, are looking at it through a very specific, invisible lens. Today, we're going to uncover what that lens is.
So, let's start with this question. What makes one religious interpretation more right than another one? I mean, seriously, take a second and think about what your gut answer is. Because you probably have one, and chances are, it's the same one most people in the modern Western world have.
And that answer is usually something like, just read the book. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? If you want the pure, authentic, unadulterated truth, you go straight to the source. Forget all the human traditions, the cultural stuff, all the baggage that's built up over centuries. Just read the words on the page. It's such a simple, powerful idea, and when it was first unleashed on the world, it was also an incredibly explosive one.
Let's give this book-alone method a name. We'll call it the text-based approach. And believe me, its arrival on the world stage didn't just change religion, it basically set Europe on fire.
Okay, so the core belief here is super important to get. The text-based approach says that the scripture, the book itself, is the only pure connection to the divine. Everything else, all the commentary, the church hierarchies, the rituals that developed over 1,000 years, all of that is seen as potential human corruption. It's like weeds that have to be cleared away to get back to the beautiful, original garden.
And this idea, well, it was the engine of the Protestant Reformation. It all kicked off in 1517 when a monk, Martin Luther, argued that the church's traditions had gone way off track. His solution? Everybody should go back to the book. And thanks to the brand new printing press, his ideas and his German translation of the Bible went viral. For the first time ever, regular people could actually read the text for themselves.
But you can imagine what the establishment thought. To them, this was pure madness. As Emperor Charles V put it, how could this one single guy be right and 1,000 years of Christian tradition be wrong? From their perspective, Luther wasn't cleaning up the religion, he was taking a sledgehammer to the very foundation that gave it meaning.
And this is where the theory ran into a very messy reality. See, Luther genuinely believed that if you just gave everyone direct access to the Bible, this single, simple, unified truth would emerge for everyone. But, as the folks at Crash Course World History so perfectly put it, yeah, that's not what happened. Not at all.
Instead of unity, what you got was fragmentation, total chaos. You had the Zwinglians, the Calvinists, the Anabaptists, and they all read the same book and came to wildly different conclusions, and every single one of them was absolutely certain they were right. What started as a debate over ideas spiraled into social revolt, decades of horrifyingly brutal religious warfare, and yeah, a massive political power grab by rulers who used this book-alone idea to justify seizing all the church's land and wealth.
So what was the alternative? What was this 1,000-year-old system that Luther was attacking? Well, we're going to call it the tradition-based approach, and it works from a completely different set of assumptions.
You see, the tradition-based view argues that a text doesn't just appear out of nowhere in a vacuum. To get what it's saying, you have to understand the entire world it came from, the original language, the culture at the time, what the author actually intended, the community it was written for. The text is just one piece of a much, much larger living system.
I love this analogy because it makes the point perfectly. Think about the pyramids. Without any context, without archaeology, without understanding ancient burial rites or their concept of the afterlife, you could invent any theory you want. Yeah, maybe they were history's most elaborate party tents. It's all the surrounding tradition and historical knowledge that anchors the meaning and stops us from coming up with totally absurd interpretations.
So how does this actually work in practice? Well, the whole system is designed for stability. Authority starts with a founder, say Jesus. He passes that authority to his successors. Boom, you've got a chain of authority. Then, a class of scholars is tasked with preserving the original context. They're the guardians of the tradition. This whole structure is built to let the religion adapt over time, but to do it in a slow, controlled way that prevents it from just shattering into a million pieces.
And here, this slide just puts the two worldviews right next to each other. Look at the huge differences. When it comes to authority, one says text alone. The other says text plus a chain of people. When it comes to context, one sees it as corruption, something to be cleared away, while the other sees it as absolutely essential for meaning. And this leads to two totally different outcomes. One is rapid, explosive, fragmenting change. The other is slow, controlled evolution.
So now we have our two frameworks, right? You've got the text-based model of Protestantism and the tradition-based model of Catholicism.
Which leads us to a really important question. Where does a religion like Islam fit into all this?
Well, the data might actually shock you. The overwhelming vast majority of the world's Muslims belong to tradition-based schools of thought. Just like Catholicism, mainstream Sunni and Shiite Islam are built on a deep foundation of scholarly tradition and a chain of authority that goes all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. The text-based movements, they're a tiny and actually very recent minority.
And this isn't a small thing, it's a foundational principle. As the scholar Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown puts it, for pretty much 1,400 years, the consensus was absolute. You do not read the Quran in a vacuum. You have to read it through the lens of the Sunnah, the Prophet's teachings and example, as it's been preserved and passed down by that long chain of scholarly tradition.
Okay, so why does this distinction matter so much? Well, because understanding it gives us a powerful new tool for making sense of one of the most misunderstood topics of our time, religious extremism. And this is where that framework we've been building becomes so incredibly useful. The common belief, the story we hear all the time in the headlines, is that extremist groups are ultra-traditionalists, right? But the reality is the exact opposite. They aren't upholding tradition, they are radically rejecting 14 centuries of it.
Just look at this comparison. It's night and day. Mainstream traditional Islamic law across all the major schools has unanimously forbidden terrorism for centuries. Extremist groups, on the other hand, they just ignore this entire legal tradition. They perform what the source calls literary gymnastics with the text, ripping it from its historical context to justify their actions. They're not traditionalists at all. They are modern, text-based revolutionaries.
And this brings us right back to where we started. Because that very common assumption, that whole the book alone approach is somehow more authentic, that's not some neutral, objective fact. It's a tradition in itself.
That gut feeling you might have had at the beginning that a literal, text-based reading is purer or more true to the religion, that's not a universal truth. It's a specific point of view, and it has a very specific history.
For many of us, especially in the Western world, it's a cultural viewpoint we've inherited directly from the Protestant Reformation. We think we're approaching a text with a totally clean slate, but what we're actually doing is looking through a 500-year-old cultural lens that was shaped by people like Martin Luther. We are, in fact, products of a tradition too.
And that leaves us with a final, much bigger question to chew on. Once you realize that one of your most obvious ideas about religion is actually just a cultural inheritance, it really makes you wonder what other deeply held beliefs, what other obvious truths that we take for granted are actually just the product of our own unseen traditions.